Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. We have with us a returning guest today. Dr. Bhooshan Shukla is a consultant psychiatrist and psychotherapist with over 2 decades of experience. He appeared on Bharatvaarta way back in April of 2020, where he spoke about parenting, and it remains one of our more popular episodes. Um, Today, we'll talk to him about mental health and the various aspects of that. Dr. Bhushan, thank you so much for making the time.
It's always a pleasure, Roshan. It's a great chance to talk to you and reach out to so many people who are your regular listeners.
Absolutely. And today, we're talking about such an important matter, important subject, which is mental health, right? I think obviously over the years there has been a greater awareness about it. Let's delve into various aspects of it. To begin with, I'd love to understand, how do you measure mental health or how do you measure mental fitness, right? I was saying before we started that for physical standards we have certain standards, right? I mean, let's say insulin sensitivity or body fat percentage or various other metrics. Are there similar metrics for mental health as well?
Sure. See, mental health exists as a spectrum from one end where you are seeing not only healthy people, but people who have ability to absorb a lot of stressors as well. To the other end, you have people whose compensatory mechanisms have broken down and now they are showing active symptoms of some mental health diagnosis or the other. Okay, so that is that entire spectrum. The difficult part is where do you decide that here health ends and illness starts? And that has always been a battleground in mental health. Depending on which side of the debate you are on, you would want to pull that line. It's almost like, there is no international boundaries, like line of actual control, and people keep pushing it around. So, say for example, I devise a questionnaire which has 10 questions, and depending on how many questions you say yes to, I will say that you have depression. Now, everybody will agree that if you say yes to all 10 questions, you have depression, and if you say yes to zero questions, you have no depression at all. But where do you draw the line? And if say I draw the line at three questions, that three yeses and you have a depression, then I'm going to have certain percentage of population which will be diagnosed as depressed. But if I draw that line at five, then that percentage changes. And this is where the real tricky bit is. That is why we always have this battle with newspapers, with governments, with agencies that have classification system, that where do you draw the line is something that you have to make really clear.
Right. So, are there any standards really? I mean, does the WHO or some other organization define these standards? And is there like an objective measure of something like this?
So there are two big objective measures that are used worldwide. These are our classification systems. One that is propagated by WHO and followed by most of the world is called ICD, International Classification of Diseases. That is the one that is accepted by Government of India. That is the legal diagnostic system and classification system in India. America, as usual, have their own classification system, which they call Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, currently in its fifth version. And Chinese have one of their own because they want to have more indigenous part reflected in that. So these are the three one, but for most of the free world, let's say there are two, DSM-5 and ICD-11, that is being used.
We're living in I mean, better times now for sure, but the last couple of years has been exceptional, right? I mean, we've seen quarantine, we've seen isolation, we've seen plenty of tragic things happening all around, and I'm sure all of this has impacted people's mental health as well. What has been your experience when you see patients today? I mean, do you think that there's been a real adverse effect because of the pandemic?
See, the thing is that a clinical population that I meet in my clinic are obviously people who are there because they have had difficulty. There's vast number of people who either haven't had difficulties or let's say who may have even benefited from the pandemic are out there. So whatever my observations are probably biased observations because they are restricted to the sample that reaches clinic. So literally in last year or so, every conversation that I have had with my child patients and their families. Everything starts with, but doctor, in the pandemic, and then it goes on. So there is no consultation that begins, middles, and ends with this sentence. So yes, obviously there is a large part of our population that has been affected, but we must also remember that the special conditions that were brought up upon us by this pandemic. few people's mental health has actually benefited. And if you allow me, I would love to talk about that as well. Yeah. So, I work with children and adolescents, and we know that going to school and giving exams and attending all those things is a big stress for many children. Children basically go to school because they get to meet friends and because everybody goes to school. No child goes to school saying that, oh, I want education. Okay, that is our adult delusion. We believe that we are imparting some values and giving them discipline and education and important stuff, and that's why they need to go to school. From a child's point of view, they need to go to school because that's where friends are. And if you stay at home, there is literally nothing to do because there's nobody there. So that's why children go to school. A lot of children, good 15 to 20% children, find this routine of going to school, spending hours and hours there, doing those studies, quite stressful. It involves a lot of travel, it involves risk, it involves exposure to fairly nasty elements in the school, in the form of not just teachers but other children as well. And all of these children, when they're relieved from the burden of going to school every day, actually found themselves to be really happy. They did not have to tie their life to the clock. They could actually switch off the camera and lie down in the bed and just listen to the teacher, not choose not to look at the face. They were protected from negative interactions that were happening there. They were protected from bullying, they were protected from harassments and all sorts of teasing, and they had a significantly reduced curriculum to prepare. And that helped them a lot, because many children who are not up to speed or have some difficulties will really struggle to complete yearly curriculum. So I do suspect that there is a large chunk of population, particularly in children, who were actually relieved by staying at home. Obviously, over a period of time, it became difficult for them as well. They got bored, there was no socialization, and they desperately wanted to go back to school. But that is one end of the spectrum that benefited. On the other hand, you had children who needed extra support, who needed special conditions, like children going to special schools, like children with autism or children with severe learning disability. Their education just completely stopped. And any such big change is very traumatic for them. They were hurt the most, their families were hurt really bad.
Yeah. No, I think the going back to school is going to take some amount of adjustment, right? I was reading an Indian Express report also that said that, math skills, for example, have declined drastically over the last couple of years because of lack of in-person teaching and so on. Yeah, I mean that's a hard one. I don't know how we're going to get back. I feel.
Absolutely. See, though we Indians love to call ourselves maths geniuses, the fact, the surveys and the assessments actually show us pretty much at the bottom of the education pyramid there. We don't do so well. Children who are able to do math at the level of fifth standard are reducing by the year. Math is something that you learn from the teacher many times in person with friends and all of that was completely taken out. Another thing that got seriously affected was language development, because we
Mm.
are a trilingual nation. We all learn English, we learn Hindi, and we learn the local language. And many of us learn a fourth, either a foreign language or Sanskrit or some other Indian language as well. And all of this language learning cannot happen online completely, because language is essentially conversation based. So when they were deprived from that opportunity to develop that language, they obviously suffered. Imagine being somebody, say you're a Tamilian who lives in Maharashtra, goes to CBSE school, and has to learn Hindi language. So
Mm.
their main chance of learning Hindi was in the school when they were speaking with other children, where Hindi was a common language of speaking. Now this child is at home for 2 years, no contact with the school, with two parents and grandparents at home who all speak Tamil at home. And what happens to their Hindi? But they still have to give their exams. So it does get complicated with each child, with each family, with each subject. There are nuances, and it makes life tricky for them.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in your over 2 decades as practice, I mean, I'm sure that you've seen attitudes towards mental health evolve a great deal, right? I mean, I was saying in the intro as well. I mean, I think there's been a greater awareness, certainly, right? Led by the West, I should say. But still, I mean, there are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to mental health. What are the most common three or four things that you often encounter?
But Roshan, we can divide mental health into three very broad categories. One group is the positive mental health, which is what people absolutely love. I'll come to that the last. At the other end of the spectrum, you have a very severe and chronic mental health issues like severe psychotic depression, like bipolar disorder, like schizophrenia, like various type of psychosis, like dementia, which are actually have very sound neurological basis. There is a neurological pathology behind it. Only the manifestations are psychological and mood manifestations. They require physical treatments like treatment with medicines. They cannot be wished away. There is no trick that will do this illness away. There is no counseling, there is no psychotherapy which is going to completely treat this illness. And in between, you have a large section where you have interpersonal issues, you have emotional difficulties, you have anxieties, depressions, and all of these things where psychotherapy or understanding oneself better has a big role. Then positive mental health steps, protecting your mental health steps has a big role. Unfortunately, most people, and I think this is failure on our part as psychiatrists, to not educate our community enough. People cannot differentiate between these three. Positive mental health has the least amount of research basis. So anybody can come up, tout any idea, and claim to be a positive mental health expert and sell you some idea that says that this will improve your mental health. And people take it at face value, but literally there is zero evidence for most of these things. Whereas at the other end, you have very clear evidence that certain medicines or certain procedures help those people get out of their schizophrenia, their bipolar disorder, and lead a normal life. So this is something that we really need to understand, that all mental illnesses are not exactly the same. The way we saw with COVID, that some people didn't even know that they got COVID, they were incidentally detected and it had no impact on their life. Whereas at the other end, people were suddenly afflicted by COVID, went to ICUs and literally died within days. There was an entire spectrum. It's the same with mental health, mental illness, that there are different illnesses, they affect people in different way, and there needs to be a totally different solution for each of them.
Right. And when does treatment become relevant or necessary? When I say treatment, I mean, like you just mentioned, right? I mean, there could be a chemical basis for a disturbance as well, right? For depression or something of that sort. So when do you advocate that a person actually seek treatment?
So my suggestion is that treatment is the second step that we talk about. First is actually having it assessed. If you have difficulty going about your day-to-day work, certain behaviors are bothering you, certain emotions are going out of control, your perceptions are getting distorted, like what you feel, what you think, what you see is losing touch with reality, then it is important that you at least approach a mental health professional and get yourself assessed. They will be able to tell you where it is coming from. Is it primarily a mental health issue, or is it a physical issue manifesting as a mental health issue? They'll be able to tell you what kind of treatment will help you get out of it. Is it just a lifestyle change that is necessary, or do you need formal counseling or psychotherapy, or is it severe enough or of the type where medicines will be necessary? So that decision is, in my opinion, best left to the professionals in the field.
I think for most people, the first level of intervention is some kind of counseling or therapy sessions as such, right? That's a big step for most people, I would say, right? I mean, seeking help, first acknowledging that they need something, they need to fix some things in their life, and second, actually seeking professional help on that front. For people who are sort of considering it, or for people who think they might have to get some help but are not very sure about it, how would you encourage them to go out and, seek help for themselves?
One of the most important things to remember is that this is not a forcible treatment. Your
Mm.
visit to a psychologist or a psychiatrist does not mean that treatment will be pushed down your throat. Some people feel, and this is a completely mistaken belief, I wish it was true, but it is not, that they believe that psychiatrists and psychologists have some kind of powers where they can actually control people's mind and make them do things that they want, like take treatment and all of that. I can assure you, nobody has that kind of power. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here seeing 20 patients a day and trying to make a living. I would probably just walk into a bank and convince the cashier to give me required amount of money. So it doesn't work that way. First step is to meet a professional, talk to them freely. Your confidentiality is guaranteed with a psychological professional, and hear them out. Hear what they have to tell you about your difficulties and what are the ways out of it. See what all options are available to you. It's ultimately your choice. Nobody is being forced to take any treatment here at all. You will not be trapped into treatment in any way. You will be in control of what is going on all the time.
Right. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is this whole mind body connection, right? I mean, people, um, and I've experienced it myself as well. The days you feel fitter are the days, I mean, you feel, mentally well as well. And vice versa. I mean, the days you don't feel physically all right, I mean, it definitely impacts your brain as well, right? And it impacts the way you think and your general attitude towards the day and the life ahead as well. Is there a basis to that? I mean, what is your opinion on that?
Oh, so that was a debate, the mind and body separation. We know that philosophically it started with Rene Descartes, who created that dualism between mind and body. And for quite some time, the Western medicine stayed stuck on treating the body and examining the body. But over last almost 70, 80 years, I would say almost 100 years, we know that there is no dualism there. Your mind exists as a function of your body. Initially, people used to say that your mind exists as a function of your brain, but we know that that is not true. If somebody, if you feel something nice with your hand, then even your hand is involved in your mental well-being. You eat something nice and that gives you certain memories or gives you certain pleasures or certain dislikes, so your tongue and your gustatory system is involved in your mind. So we should be looking at ourselves as a single unit. The way function of a muscle is strength, in the same way mind resides in your body as a function of your body. So there is no dualism for us anymore. In fact, we are going one step ahead and saying that even the society around us has a direct impact on us. The way society looks at us, treats us, creates conditions for us, has a huge impact on our mental health. So the current model that we have been using in mental health for almost 50 years plus is called as the biopsychosocial model, where we believe that biological components of your body, psychological components that affect you, and the social forces around you all come together to create difficulties for you. So all must be considered when we are looking at remedies as well.
I was actually, I mean, listening to a very interesting study yesterday that said that the more richer and prosperous nations have more depression and more mental health issues than the other way, right? I mean, you would kind of expect that to trend in the opposite way, but there is something to it, right? I mean, if you remove the biological factors, if you remove the internal considerations as such, the external culture, the society, the way it impacts you, this also kind of deeply impacts your self-esteem, the way you feel, and so on and so forth, right? And also considering how interconnected everyone is at this point of time, sitting here, I can find out anything, whatever is happening anywhere across the world. I feel like all of this is a lot of weight on our minds, right? I mean, how does it play out on us?
Well, it does, and you're quite right that what happens around us is really quite important. Though I disagree with the first part about the mental health burden increases with prosperity, that is not actually completely true, because people stay focused on depression. Whole mental health discussions simply focus around depression and go around that. So that is not the thing. Depression is one of the other many major things in mental health. But the fact still remains that how well connected we are to people around us, how well supported we are by people around us, is a big factor in mental health. So societies that are more disconnected, that are more individualistic, that believe that individual has a responsibility to sort out their life completely, they are solely responsible for anything good or bad that happens to them, and they must find out their own way in the world by themselves, definitely put a huge amount of unfair burden on an individual. Even the burden to be happy is a big burden. Everybody wants to be happy, everybody wants to be successful, everybody wants to be beautiful, and everybody is supposed to say that I accept myself completely. No, I don't. I'm not happy with my receding hairline. I'll have to live with it, and I have to find out ways of living with it. So that all these factors do affect. And if I constantly am being bombarded from all the media with people who look younger than me, fitter than me, and have like you have darker and more hair and more healthy hair, then obviously that's going to affect my self image big time. So it does affect us. Everything reaches in, it leaves an impact, and if that impact is negative, it makes me feel bad about myself or inadequate about myself. I'm going to be miserable.
What are some ways we can improve our mental health? Some simple 3 or 4 things that one can start doing as a practice, as a ritual, that can really help them cope with the anxiety or the stress of modern life?
I'm so glad you asked this question because research actually has a very credible answer to this question. People have looked at it, scientists have studied it, practiced it, and seen the outcome. That it's deceptively simple. One thing is that you need to have people with whom you relate. You need to have friends, families, or some social cause with which you are connected. So, being connected is a big part of your mental health. Second is you must exercise every day. Healthy body is a primary drive for mental health, and we see that in people whose physical health is affected, their mental health deteriorates quite rapidly. So having good physical health is important. You can work for that. Third thing, which is again a surprise for a lot of people, but once you say it, it sounds like common sense, is that you must get adequate sleep every day. We all are fairly seriously sleep deprived because of the phones and cameras and internet and the TV that is there in front of us all the time. Check for a few days without alarm to see how much sleep your body needs. And most people need between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So, getting that kind of sleep is really important. Having a nutritious diet is important. I'm not talking about which type of diet you use, but any diet that gives you adequate vitamins, adequate nutrition is something that is really important. And one interesting thing is that if you have hobbies, if you have some fascination, if something catches your mind and gives you joy, which does not have direct monetary implications on your life at all, but this is something that you do purely for joy, like listening to music, making music, reading, going out and working with people, being in nature, it helps you, then it has a great impact. Regularly visiting nature, being away from your usual environment, also has a significant positive impact on mental. All these things matter.
No, I think what you mentioned is so important because I think as adults, we somehow weigh the pros and cons of every activity that we do. Almost inherently, we are looking at, hey, how is something useful to us? Having that sort of unscheduled free time, like absolute free time, is really helpful, right? It's hard enough coping with all of this as adults, but I think as kids, it becomes way more challenging, right? And considering that you work with children, how can we help children adapt to some of these things? Because I do feel that the rate of information that is just being bombarded at kids these days is crazy, right? I mean, I still am the pre-internet generation, right? We went to libraries for our school projects and everything, but the kids who are growing up with smartphones and screens all around, how can parents help their children?
I think in the very first sentence, you picked up the most important point there, that we need to have downtime. Everybody needs to have a dedicated downtime every day. Constant connectivity, which stimulates us so much and occupies so much of our mind space, has to be reduced deliberately. And third thing I would say is that we need to learn to slow down, and children need to know that there is enough time in their life to do things. You need not be a piano master and a mathematician and a science fellow and somebody who does coding everything before you have finished your 10th standard. No, pace it out. Take your time. Do, if you like one thing, focus on that, do it, and then move on. So slowing down is something that needs to be taught to kids, that nothing is running away from you, life is not getting over. 20 or 30 years ago, your choices in 11 12th standard or your choices after 12th standard determined your life. It is not like that anymore. It was like that for your parents who come from an old generation. Life is not like that anymore, world is not like that anymore. Change of stream is possible. In fact, most people do change, make so many significant changes in your life. So life is full of opportunities. That is something that needs to be, imbibed by parents first and then passed on to children. We do not live in a situation where our children are going to starve and die. That is that is a fear that most parents have in their mind. The moment the child misbehaves a little bit, they start seeing pictures of children being drug addicted or teenage girls being pregnant or children running vagrant on the streets or them dying of starvation and stuff like that, the child rejects one dinner, and the mother starts and the father starts wondering, are they going to die of starvation or something like that? So we really need to slow down. We really need to calm down. World is a great place, and it's literally getting better every day. There is enough statistics to prove that the way life has gotten better for most people in the world in last 100 years is unbelievable, something that hasn't happened in last 5000 years of civilization. So
Yeah.
we are actually living in the golden age of this world, and we really need to slow down, look around, and have fun, enjoy it.
Right. Every generation feels like they've figured out parenting, right? Unlike earlier when, you had maybe three generations of family living together. So it kind of averaged out, I suppose, right? Now, considering that, it's all nuclear families and stuff, we have swung from somewhat passive parents to now very, very active, very, very hands on parents. And I'm sure that, you've seen both sides of the spectrum, right? What is the right way? I mean, how much do you hold versus how much do you let go versus the other really difficult choices?
I think solving Kashmir issue would be easier than answering this question. Because it see, I don't think there is a perfect answer for that at all, and I
Yeah.
don't think we should even claim that we know the perfect answer. We live in a very complex system and a constantly evolving system. So in such times, I fall back on my guide of philosophy, Nicholas Nassim Taleb, and I believe that what Taleb believes in is harm reduction via
Do
negative
no
analysis.
harm. Yeah.
Stuff we know is harmful, let us stop that first. Instead of trying to achieve something big in a complex system where each changing factor has unknown consequences, reducing the factors which are known to be harmful is something that is very important. And it is very simple. That actually spending time with children, hearing them out, not giving them the idea of what we think is right. Just few days ago, I tweeted that everybody asks what is the advice for young people, and my suggestion is that no, there is no advice. Young people are independent thinkers, they know what is happening, and they make the world a better place, every generation of young people. So don't give them any advice, just get out of their way. And I think that works for parenting as well, that other than ensuring basic safety, letting children explore themselves and we understanding the process while it is happening is really important. Controlling our panic as parents is one of the key ingredients of happy parenting. I would not use the word successful here because we don't even know what are the parameters of success. I have seen children going to prominent educational institutes like IITs and medical colleges, and then not being able to see it through because of their mental health difficulty, because of their personal burdens, or giving up those careers and doing something which is not up to living up to their promise. Would you call them, I mean, for all practical purposes they are successful, but are they happy? I wouldn't exchange my life with such a person. So that is the crux of parenting, that stuff that is known to be harmful for a long time, try and avoid that, and let the children have the courage to express themselves. Let the children have the courage to debate with you. I'm not saying that every little decision has to be discussed and debated like parliament. No, I'm too much in favor of parental autonomy for that, or parental authority for that. But at least in specific areas, children should be able to disagree with their parents, and parents must accept that disagreement as an intellectual difference, not as a relationship break. And this is
Right.
something important to remember, because this is how they are going to preserve their relationships. We look all around and we see people fighting with each other for their political opinions. And one feels sad that you cannot be your neighbor's enemy because two of you have two different political opinions. So, that ability to live with different opinions is something that must be learned by the child, and it can only be learned in the family.
Right. Yeah, that's such an important thing, I feel. And it impacts the way that you deal with everyone around you as well, right? Outside of home as well. We're living in the age of influencers. Of course, we have influencers for everything from finance to, fitness to anything. And we also have influencers coaching us on mindset and mental health and positive attitude and so on and so forth. And I think, considering that for a vast majority of us, I mean, if you were to poll us and ask, what is mental health, I think it's negotiating people and situations in our daily life that would constitute a good frame of mind or not, right? So do you think that it actually helps, I mean, having, following people with this new age mantras of, positive mindset and so on?
As a psychiatrist, I actually disagree with that because, as I told you right in the beginning, this positive psychology bit has a lot more hype than substance into it. We have very few studies with very few credible research credentials that following a particular path actually makes you positively happy. So, somebody who's constantly selling happiness is essentially a salesman, not actually having any real substance, is something that I have seen again and again, because most of these influencers have a program to sell you, have a product to sell you. And
Mm,
other than that, they have really nothing else to offer. Many people use that hypnotic, repetitive, quasi religious language that puts people to almost sleep. And that feels great because in this day and age, who spends 15 quiet minutes, in the middle of daytime? So that is, in my opinion, a very big red flag. If somebody is kind of hypnotizing you and making you feel all nice and good about yourself, then we have a problem there. I'm not against people feeling nice. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that somebody telling you that this is one thing which is going to solve all your problems, no man, that really doesn't exist. So being positive or working towards being positive is great, but the toxic positivity that change your thoughts and everything will get better, no, actually it doesn't. Life many times still remains very, very difficult. So I need to learn a way to cope with this, to accept the difficulties and not just have this positive thought that I'm going to win Olympic medal, I'm going to win Olympic medal, and then bingo, 3 years down the line, I win Olympic medal. No, it doesn't happen that. It really doesn't happen that. So my focus when it comes to mental health is on relationships. As you said that we are becoming more and more isolated, smaller and smaller families. So I talk about cloud parenting or group parenting. That I do not have a ton of cousins, but I do have a ton of friends who visit my home regularly. I feel responsible for their children. My children feel connected to them. So I'm developing a different type of extended family, which I have chosen to grow. And that is what really matters. So we do not have our genetic or hereditary or natural families, but we have our created families nowadays. So it is important that children feel connected to all of these people. They feel connected to children, and we see it as a group responsibility or joint responsibility for ourselves. And that is how we are going to be happy.
Yeah, that's another very important point as well, I feel, because I think the role of community in an individual's life, right? I mean, has become lesser and lesser relevant today, because I remember when I was growing up, I mean, I think the entire neighborhood parented me in some sense, right? You knew because you couldn't do certain things in certain areas and stuff, right? I mean, uh,
Absolutely.
there was your neighbor was as good as your mother or father or anyone, and if they caught you doing some things, I mean, obviously you would hear it, right? And that has kind of reduced more and more, I feel, and that impacts a great deal of what we do. While we have the independence and the freedom to do whatever we want, I think not having someone show care or concern is also, like, impacting us very adversely, I would say.
Yeah, we live in a generation of aggressive parenting
Hmm.
where parents are aggressively protecting their children. As you said, if I was seen walking around on the streets of Nasik at say 11 o'clock in the afternoon in my school uniform, any stranger could say, "Hey, hang on, you're supposed to be in
Yeah.
school at this point of time. What are you doing here? What is your name? Where do you live?" And they would grab me by the scruff of my neck and take me home. Or if the
Yeah.
school was closer, they would read that on the badge of my uniform and take me to the school and hand me over to the principal. Imagine a stranger doing that to your child in this day and age. We will not
Impossible.
allow that. We are voraciously, or we are aggressively protecting our children from having any contact with the community. We are protecting our children from having any negative consequences of their behavior. So there is no natural learning that is happening. We are being overprotective, like a tigress would protect her cubs very early on. We are trying to keep our kids those cubs for all their life, and that is a big problem that I see. So you have children who grow up with a big handicap. They don't even know whether they're children or adults. What are they supposed to do? Because they believe that parents will solve their problems all the time. They will be protected. And very quickly they realize by the time they are 12, 13 years old that the world has become so big and complex that their parents, no matter how powerful, are grossly inadequate to sort out all of their problems. And that experience comes as a big shock to adolescents.
Right. How much of an impact do you think the fact that our timelines are getting sort of extended, right? I mean, when we choose to marry, when we choose to have kids, and so on. I mean, all of this is getting more or less extended. As generations go by, how much of it do you think has an impact on us?
So we all are living longer as well. We all are
Right.
living a lot longer. So we are taking our time to do things. And I see it as a good thing. People taking their own time to start their family is a good thing. So there is no pressure to get married quickly by the time you are 20 or 22, or have children within 1 year of your marriage. If that pressure is reducing on young people, I think it will do them a great deal of favor. It will let them find their own feet, feel comfortable with themselves and in their intimate relationships, and then take a decision to have children. So they'll have a better chance. See, most of the Europeans or even North Americans have a biphasic pattern of having children. Either they have them very young or they have them much later in life. And the research tells us that people who have children as more mature people actually make better parents. Their children are more confident and possibly more happy. So it is absolutely fine. I think it's a great welcome change, and that will help reduce the burden of number of humans on the planet, which is even better.
All right. For someone who wants to understand more about mental health and go down that rabbit hole, right? What are some books or resources that you would suggest?
I think one of the books that has influenced me greatly, and I highly recommend it to all my friends, is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winning, a behavioral economist. It gives us an idea of how rapidly our brain takes decisions, how little awareness we have, and whatever we think about our brain, how the brain actually works very differently. So that is, and they have the next book that has come up on the similar lines called Noise. I would highly recommend these two books. Noise is a much easier book to read and a smaller book, so probably you could start with that. But it is of great help to understand how the brain and the mind interaction functions. After that, pick up any classic book that you like. I would even recommend Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud. Though it is more than 100-year-old book, it's absolutely fascinating. It tells you so much about how the subconscious functions, and it is interesting. Pick up anything by Carl Rogers or Albert Ellis, and you would know so much more about your mind and be intrigued by it. These are people who devoted their entire life to understanding mind and taking it to people. So these books are absolutely great treasure.
I think off late, at least, I mean, the productivity gurus have kind of realized that you cannot stack 40 things in into every minute, every hour of our days, right? I mean, I'm seeing a lot of like, hey, I mean, why don't you breathe and why don't you let the mind function as a human mind and not as a machine, right? Because I think otherwise, I mean, for a brief period, I felt like all of the self-help or advice was on how you can accomplish 30 things or
Hmm.
40 things within the hour as such, and we were kind of all optimizing to be industrious rather than optimize even a little bit for our genius, right?
Yeah, one thing we definitely know from all this research in brain and mind is that we are serial monogamists, and that is how we function the best. Parallel processing is not really our thing. We are serial processors, so it's best to do that and do that well so that you are more happy in your life and you actually go much further than trying 20 things at a time. You may be able to do it for a very short while, but you're bound to drop the ball or two, and very quickly everything spins into chaos. So stick with one thing at a time, give it adequate time, and love is something that works into mind.
All right, that's an interesting note to end the podcast on. Thank you, Dr. Bhushan. This was a fascinating chat, and we should definitely do a follow-up sometime.
Thank you. Thank you, Roshan. I'll be very happy to be back here again.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. If you want to see more content like this, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We started Bharatvaarta to facilitate long form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you wish to offer us feedback, do reach out to us on social media. We are at Bharatvaarta on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also get in touch with us on our website www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.